Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to be hearing from Sean as to what his career path has taken him and how he became a newscaster, what that entails, any training he's acquired. Also, what are some highs and lows within the role? How has COVID-19 impacted his daily work routine? Sharing some stories of who helped him along the way, maybe some inspirational folks that he's established rapport with. Any questions you may have, we ask that you put them in the chat box. Please mute all lines. And once again, thank you for joining us, Sean.
No, no worries. Actually, I have a question for you to start. Is there any way I could get a recording of this too, or could record it on my end? Because my news director asked if I could just get a video. He wants to do like a little, put it on the website that we were participating in this, if that's okay.
Yes, by all means. After the session, I'll definitely forward that along to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. So I'll start with a little brief introduction. I am Sean Coffey. I work at News Center 25 in Victoria. I've been here for almost 2 years now, since June 2018. Originally was hired as a sports guy, as the weekend sports anchor and sports reporter during the week. But like a lot of kind of smaller market TV stations, you kind of end up doing more than you bargained for, which is a good thing. I mean, it really kind of helps to increase your skill set. So I've done news reporting. I've anchored news plenty of times. I'm working more on the digital side now that the pandemic has kind of shut some things down, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I'm from New York originally, not New York City, but not far from it, about 30 minutes north of New York City. I went to college in Virginia, a school called the College of William and Mary, and this was my first official job out of college. So it's been a great first step for me to come here and do what I love, which is to talk about sports, and to, my mom likes to say, be a knucklehead on TV. So it's been very, very fun in that regard. Just to kind of give you guys an idea of what my kind of day-to-day looks like. In TV, unless you're working on the morning show, which requires you get up way, way earlier than I want to get up, like at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, so that you're able to, actually even earlier than that, they have to be there at that time so they can be ready for a 5 a.m. show. The majority of the work here is done night side. So because our shows air every night at 5, 6, 9, and 10, I come to work typically a little later than this, like around 2, and I'll stay here till around 11 p.m., except for in the fall when we're doing football. And then I'm here typically past midnight because we have to stay and post all that stuff online, at least on the sports side. But it's definitely an irregular industry in that way. If you want to work a 9 to 5, news is probably not the job for you, but it's got a lot of perks. It's a cool job. It allows you to be creative. There's a lot of different kind of opportunities, and obviously it's cool to be able to have that exposure on air and kind of be able to express yourself, creatively, especially in sports like that. It's kind of going through these top talking points. Excuse me. I chose the field because my dad he was a sports writer in New York City. He wrote about, he did a lot of baseball coverage up there, covering the Yankees and the Mets. But I knew from a young age I wanted to do something involved in sports, but not so much kind of the writing like he did print journalism. So I was fascinated by sports TV growing up. I wanted to make sure that I put myself in a position to pursue it. And one of the biggest things you can do to that end is to get yourself around industry professionals. So I was lucky to be able to get a couple of really good internships when I was in high school and in college that kind of put me in a setting where I was surrounded by industry professionals and was able to sort of rub elbows, so to speak, with some pretty famous and influential people in sports television. And even though you're not going to get on-air opportunities in high school or in college working in those settings, just the ability to pick their brains and, kind of get one-on-one time with them and, potentially be able to use them as a reference down the road was amazing. It was pretty invaluable. And, even if you're not able to intern or find a connection with a major TV station, anything you can do to get involved in media, working for a local paper or radio station or what have you. I mean, here in Victoria, I think they have internship opportunities too. It's, anything you can do to kind of surround yourself in a sort of even tangential sort of industry, I think is really, really helpful down the road. Because not only does it give you that line on your resume, but I mean, just the personal connections that you're able to make and forge, those are things that you can sort of cash in on for quite a while down the road. And I definitely have. I mean, there's a lot of, it's a small industry. You'll find just media in general is a pretty small industry. So, um, you'll never know when you'll be able to kind of cash in on a favor or be able to kind of, retouch, or reconnect, I should say, with someone who maybe you knew earlier on in your life. Um, in terms of kind of training, so there's not really any sort of one, uh, um, how do I put this? With entry level TV, I'm not going to lie, you kind of do a lot of your training on the fly. I mean, like I said, a lot of those experiences you have in potential internships or things that you can do on your own really, really help. But not everyone that breaks into small market TV knows really what they're doing or what to expect off the bat. I mean, there's definitely a 1 or 2 week training period where they familiarize you with the different equipment that you're going to have to use, which is typically just in, a large over the shoulder camera. But nowadays you can do more and more just shooting on this because your phone quality is so good. But a lot of it is just going to be trial and error. I mean, people definitely, I definitely did my fair share of failing, so to speak. Kind of looking back at some of my first couple weeks on air, there was definitely a lot that went wrong, but it's those experiences that I think kind of make you better in the long run. So, it's really incumbent on yourself to sort of drive yourself to be better and to improve. And, it's really important to rewatch yourself. I hate watching myself on TV because I hate my voice. I just think I look really bad. Um, but it's important that you do it because you can't really get better unless you do it. So, just kind of forcing yourself to nitpick at different things that you've done, especially if you want to be on air on TV is really, really important. So I'll DVR myself and I'll go back and watch myself on TV, which I probably look like an idiot doing, but it's pretty fun. I think Bianca's laughing at me over here. Bianca's one of our directors. I'll get to her in a second. So let's see. Entry level position for your field. I mean, typically you want to start off in TV in a smaller market, like Victoria. So TV markets are broken up by what are called designated market areas, or DMAs. They range from DMA number 1, which is the biggest market in the country, which is New York City, because it's the biggest city. And you get all the way up to the smallest little towns in Montana and Nebraska. And there are about 210 of them total. Victoria is right around 200. So it's definitely one of the smaller DMAs in the country. But that's kind of typically the way that people in this industry progress. Is they'll start in a smaller market, be it here, be it in Corpus Christi, other small areas outside Texas. They get those day-to-day repetitions, those on-air reps, and the opportunities to kind of, like I said, kind of work on your craft. And then from there, they can sort of build up what's called a reel, which is like a compilation that you can create that's got like some of your best clips on it. So, typically when I'm out in the field or covering an event and I know I just did an interview that sounded really good, or I did a live report or a live shot that I thought looked good, at a football game. I'll kind of make a note of it and I'll go back into my computer where all of those videos are saved once they're on air, and I'll cut that and I'll put it on my reel so I could show that to potentially my next boss and say, listen, like, look, this is a full sort of compilation of what I've done today. And it kind of shows kind of the best of the best. It's like a greatest hits for your on-air clips. So, being able to kind of be able to show news directors who are the bosses in these newsrooms that you're able to handle the pressure of being out on a live shot is really, really important, because that is definitely a little intimidating when you're out. I mean, for me, it's more at sporting events, but when you're out reporting on potentially tragedies like an auto accident or a murder or, whatever's happening in the community, when that red light comes on and you're on live TV, it can be pretty intimidating because there are no do-overs at that point. You're live. So it's definitely good to be able to keep track of your best moments so that you can show those to employers down the road. In terms of income, if you don't make a lot of money in small market TV, there's kind of a salary range. I mean, I know people in the industry that have made as little. I mean, news doesn't pay, they say. because it's a job that a lot of people want to do. It tends to be it's a fun job. I won't lie. It doesn't really feel like I'm ever at work, which is great. But I know people in news that make as little as $25,000 a year. It's pretty, your salaries aren't going to be that high. But as you work your way up, they just tend to gradually increase. So, it's kind of, if you're serious about being on air and being a news or a sports personality, you kind of need to go through the trenches a little at the beginning, kind of start at the bottom and be willing to persevere through some of the challenges that you're going to face there, and some of some of the restrictions from your pay, and then just kind of hope that it'll bear out in the long term. What do I enjoy the most about my job? Bianca, what do I enjoy the most about my job? I'm just playing. What do I enjoy the most about my job? It's easy for me because I'm a sports guy. That's not funny. She's making jokes over here. It's gonna get me to laugh. I enjoy going out, and first off, being able to cover sporting events for a living is kind of a joke. It's awesome. I don't know. If you love sports like I do, it doesn't feel like work. You're just kind of out. You're able to find these storylines in these local communities that really matter. But I think I just love telling stories that people don't know about. It's so fun and rewarding for me to, be able to find, in my case, more local athletes and kind of get their backstories and hear about where they've come from, and kind of compare those to some of the other stories I've heard, but also my own experiences personally, and be able to tell a story that really impacts the local community. There's nothing that makes me feel better about what I do than when people come up to me in public and say that they saw a story and liked it, or were moved by something, because that's why I do what I do. I really, my dad, again, he wrote longer, he kind of was a longer form reporter, would write sort of feature pieces a lot. And now he writes books. So that kind of knack for storytelling has always been lodged in my brain. And just being able to find those stories that haven't been told and to tell them, especially in a smaller community like this, it's really, really rewarding. It really can pay great dividends for you. Academic knowledge unit. Sorry, I'm just kind of moving down the list here of talking points. Academic knowledge, there's not really a set. You definitely don't need to know math, because I'm horrible at math. Math is, I barely can divide. I have to pull out my calculator when I tip at a restaurant. But it really, there's no set path, truly. A lot of people that work in news work in either, they major when they go to college in either communications, or a lot of them do some sort of business classes. There's broadcast and journalism degrees, obviously. I didn't do any of that. I was an English major and I minored in marketing. So I had a kind of totally different skill set. But, being an English major, I kind of tried to develop those writing and comprehension skills as much as possible, so that when it came time to tell stories on a digital platform like this, I kind of am very comfortable writing and curating my work. So I'm not the greatest example, because there aren't a ton of English majors I've met that work in news, but it's really up to you. It's really, again, it's kind of incumbent on the individual to sort of build a path that they feel is right. And as long as you're developing the correct skill set, you're practicing opportunities to be on air, you're taking advantage of potential local internship opportunities or work opportunities in the area that you live, that's really all that you can ask for. A journalism degree definitely helps, but there's no better experience than being in a newsroom and kind of experiencing what that's like day in and day out, because there are people that, could have majored in Chinese that, come to a news station and they work, and it's just kind of getting the experience of working here that really will prove the most valuable in the long run. I like to say your degree feels like it matters in the moment, and it definitely does. It shapes your skill set and it shapes what you do. But you're not going to rely as heavily on your college degree once you're 5 or 10 or 20 years outside of college than you are in that immediate time once you graduate. So, for me, again, I studied English. That was always kind of came a little more easily to me than the maths and the sciences of the world. But that's not to say that you couldn't study something that you're passionate about and still want to pursue a career in news, because I'm sure that people have done that. In terms of COVID, COVID has affected what I do. Obviously, there are no more sports, which makes me very, very sad. Um, I'm like sitting on my couch watching like cornhole and old bowling and like World Series of Poker videos. So that's too bad. But um, yeah, they've had me do news more recently since the state has started to reopen again, which is great. They've had me kind of covering local businesses that are reopening, stuff like that. But they've also had me doing a lot of remote work at home, which is all digital. I mean, they've had me kind of managing social media platforms for the station. They've had me monitoring our website. I've been a digital editor for them because they know with the English degree, I'm a strong editor. I'm a strong writer. I can kind of look over some of the on-air reporters' work and make sure that it's all presentable and it's kind of ripe to be put on our website. So I've kind of since the pandemic broke out, I haven't really been here, which is the studio, that often. I'll show you guys around here in a second. They're doing some work over here, which is why I was just talking off camera with them. Um, but yeah, so it's definitely changed my day to day. It's not bad being able to um, it's not bad being able to work from home for the most part. But it's in terms of sports, it's pretty much frozen what I was doing before. Let me get to some of these questions here, and then I'll show you around. Um, what extracurricular activities do you recommend high schooler partake in? If there's any sort of media lab or club at your high school, I know at my high school, um, there we had some sort of media lab where you could work on video editing and audio editing. I mean, those are skills that you're definitely going to want to develop because you have to edit and shoot your own work. So even if you're not going out with a professional camera and shooting and making digital stories, just being able to like sit down at a computer and work on different editing software like Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro or Delete. I mean, those are skills that you're going to really have to need if you want to be on air in any newsroom. So, try and familiarize yourself with computers, with if they do have a video camera there, with video cameras. As much as possible, just because you will be using those a lot if you want to work in news. Um, Soft skills that are needed for this job when you're doing a tough story. Let's see. I mean, obviously professionalism. You want to be on time. You want to present yourself well, be well dressed. Use correct grammar, all that stuff. It's important to carry yourself in a professional way. But just what I've found is the best thing you can do is to kind of get out of your own way when you're interviewing someone, especially for a tough story. You want to remove yourself from the story because it's not about you. You're just a medium to kind of get that story out to the public. So go to whoever the interview subject, go to their feelings, go to where they're coming from, and just make sure use your best judgment. It's hard at times, I won't lie, and some interviews are easier than others, especially once you develop a relationship with someone or certain people. It'll help if you have to interview them down the road. But it's all you kind of have to develop a pulse for the do's and don'ts for what's going to be appropriate in a given moment. It's hard. There's not really a blanket way to handle that. You kind of have to kind of take it case by case. Um, for a student that's been diagnosed with a disability, how inclusive is the industry? I'll say it's getting a lot more inclusive, which is great. I'm all for like total inclusivity in news. I'm probably not the best one to ask about that, but I'm sure that I know that for a fact that newsrooms are certainly hiring people with certain disabilities, and it's against the law now for them to discriminate on that basis. So, I think generally it's again that's kind of that sort of does go case by case, but in 2020 here, you know, I'm proud to say we're at a point where there are definitely opportunities, including for people with disabilities in news. Again, I'm not really the authority on that. I wish I knew more. Um, are there internships paid or unpaid that a student could get involved with at your studio? I believe there are. Bianca, we have internships here, don't we? Do you know? Okay, I'm gonna have to ask, and I'll let Raquel know that. I'll get a firm answer on that. I believe we do. I know that there's a lot of even part-time work, which is the work in which would be pretty similar to an internship, and you would be able to make money too. But our production staff for the most time is part-time, right? I don't know that we've hired kids either fresh out of high school or maybe even in senior year of high school. I'm not sure how that works, but um, Yeah. So I'll find out what the internship situation is here because I was under the impression that there were internships at News Center 25, but come to think of it, no, there definitely are. We had 2 interns last year. I'll find out exactly what the application process for that is, and I'll let Raquel know so that she can pass that along to everybody. For sports newscasting, how inclusive is the industry for females? Um, Definitely very inclusive. It is actually a great time to be a female trying to break into sports news. Obviously, companies going back to the question on work on disability in the workplace. Companies are trying to be more inclusive now. There's more opportunities for non-white, non-male people because for years and years and years, you turn on the TV and everyone was white and everyone was male. Um, so yes, there are definitely a lot of opportunities for females. I'm happy to say that we're moving to a point now where your race and your gender really doesn't matter as much as your ability to do your work in a professional way. So yeah, I think it's pretty much we're getting to a place now where if you're able to work on your craft and you're able to prove that you're going to be an industry pro and a hard worker, um, being a female or being a race other than white, I mean that's not gonna hold you back at all. So I would just say if you're a female looking to get into the industry, just like I said earlier, just do everything you can to get practice in your high school, in your local community. Try and even something you could do and I even did this when I was in high school. In some towns they have media rental shops. You can go out and you can rent your own camera and you can go out and you can shoot a story. You can practice, standing there with a microphone and just go back and look at your stuff. I did that a couple times, and just to sort of give myself on camera reps before I had them here in Victoria. So anything you can do to give yourself, you know, more experience in that regard will prove invaluable. And before I give you guys a tour, I'll just say this. I said news is an irregular industry, but as much as I love what I do and as fun as my job is, it's definitely not for the faint of heart. It requires a lot of hustle. It requires a lot of hours. It's fun work. It's rewarding work. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but it takes a high frustration tolerance, I'll say, especially in the middle of July when you're scrambling around a 50-mile area running from football practice to football practice in 95-degree heat, which hot for me was like 75, and then I moved here and now hot is like it's just like it's like an oven here. It's unbelievable. But it's been good. I've dropped sweating out a lot of my body weight. Just definitely be prepared to hustle. Be prepared to move quickly. Stuff happens quickly in news. You can be sitting at your computer looking at Twitter, and then the next moment, you know, breaking news happens, all hell breaks loose, and you're on the run and pedal to the metal. So just be ready for be ready for things to change at a moment's notice. Be prepared to hustle, and if you take yourself seriously, if you're willing to put in the time and get the reps that you're going to need in the long term. Just be yourselves, just be creative, be true to yourself. I mean, like I said earlier, being in news gives you a lot of creative space. You can be fun with certain stories as long as you have. Again, it takes judgment. You're not going to be fun and cute with a story about a double murder, but if you're doing a story like last week, I did a story on a local barbershop opening, and part of the story, like I got my haircut in the story, and I was messing around with the barber. It's a guy I know. It's a guy I developed a relationship with, and it was fun. I mean, it was great. You can have fun in those kinds of ways while being professional. So just be willing to adapt, be willing to work hard, and do whatever you can to get a leg up, and you guys will all be mighty successful. I have no doubt. Um, Sorry, that actually went by faster than I thought. Let me see. So let's give you guys a tour of the studio here. Now they have me on. Why do you have me on screen? Seems like they have me here. All right. So this is our anchor desk over here. I apologize in advance because, like I said, there is a little bit of construction going on here. So you have. Sorry, I shouldn't have done this on my computer. So this is where the anchors in our studio sit. So we're talking the news anchor. So whenever I would anchor the news, that's where I would be. Over on this side, kind of in between these ladders, you have our weather station. Brian, who did one of these earlier, is hiding behind this curtain, like he's the Wizard of Oz back there. Hey, Brian.
Right there.
There he is.
Gang.
Here.
How you doing?
There you go. Not bad, bro. So Brian will hang out over here. This is where he'll deliver your nightly weather, and then over there is his green screen. So when you guys see all those cool weather graphics that come on the screen, those are all kind of digitally produced and put on over. I don't even know, like, how does a green screen work?
It's just that they added it from the chroma key in the control room on the board there. They're able to overlay my graphics essentially on the green screen.
Okay.
And of course, the camera, I see a return monitor, and it's kind of backwards a little bit, but it's something that you just learn and just rely on sign monitors.
There you go. One side part of that, though, if you're on a green screen, you can't wear green, or you'll just be like a floating. You'll be like a floating head.
Invisible.
Exactly, you become invisible. So that's kind of neat. And then over here is my sports block. I shouldn't say my, but is the sports block. So we'll have a monitor put up behind me here. It's just adjacent over there to the news desk, and the camera will cut away to a camera over here, and this is where we deliver the sports. So the cameras we use in studio look something like this. You can kind of see they're on wheels, so you can roll them around, you can move them up and down, and they have this giant sort of boxy thing looking on the front, and you'll see here that is your teleprompter. So when you're in the studio, you're reading off of that screen right there. So all that stuff that you're seeing read is obviously not memorized. It's pre-produced in a program on a computer, and then you press save, and it goes from your computer to one of these cameras in the studio so that you can read everything in real time. So once you're in the studio, once you've done all kind of the hard work, which is writing out your whole story, figuring out what you want to say, it's as easy as just reading it down. And that teleprompter is run by a guy who sits right here, and he'll just scroll through. It's not working for me right now, but he can just scroll through that and kind of keep track of where you are. So that's pretty straightforward too. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything. We have this one other monitor, which is our sports monitor over here, but it's hanging out over here right now, probably because of this construction. And then we have our last little section of the studio over here, which is just kind of, we'll do live studio reports. We'll do interviews sometimes over here. We have a show that runs every week called Community Crossroads, which is typically shot over here at another desk. So pretty straightforward stuff in the studio. But that's kind of everything you have to see. I'm curious if anyone else has any questions. I'm happy to take them. I don't know if I left anything out, but yeah, that's pretty much the long and short of it.
Before we go, Sean, could you possibly state your words of wisdom, your advice? If you do high school all over again, what insight would you let a young individual know on, just to ensure that they hit their target?
Yeah. So, I'll say there were definitely people coming out of high school that had more experience than me working in the media, or kind of, giving themselves more reps. If there's a high school newspaper, that's something that I wrote for my high school newspaper for 1 year. But looking back, if I could have written for my high school newspaper for all 4 years, I would have done it. If there's any sort of high school publication, just sort of to familiarize yourself with the AP style, with proper grammar, with different writing techniques. I mean, that's all really, really valuable. Those are all really, really valuable skills that you can use down the road. And I know most high schools now have some sort of printed publication. I don't really know about the local ones here, but definitely do that. I mean, again, if there's any sort of opportunity to borrow equipment from your school, you could do that too. And if you want to be involved in sports specifically, I think just sort of hanging around the local sports teams, just trying to find potential stories that you can even work on your own independently at your local high school, I think could prove pretty invaluable too, because the stories are out there. You just sometimes have to do a little bit of digging. And I know that's kind of weird when you're in high school and these are like your classmates, not, the people that you're doing stories on, but sometimes you got to kind of like just get out of your comfort zone, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much for that information. If anyone does have any follow-up questions, definitely feel free to email me and I can forward those along. Once we have some information as to whether they do internships and how the interview process goes, or application process, I will forward that information along to any interested potential candidates. One question that did just come up: What would be some tips to recover from an instance where you were doing a live broadcast if something embarrassing were to occur?
Well, listen, I think depends on what the embarrassing incident is, I guess. There are varying degrees of embarrassing. I haven't had too many, like, I mean, it's not like anyone's ever like pulled my pants down or anything on TV, but I've like slipped up and, words wise, and it's been, I've had moments where I look back and I'm like, wow, I just like kind of froze like a deer in the headlights, and you just look kind of nervous and scared, which is never good. But you just kind of have to be prepared for that to happen. There's no real practice for live TV except for live TV. Like I said earlier, I mean, when you see there's a red light that comes on your camera, it's just, you got to kind of just learn how to deal with the pressure there. And there's no real, for some people comes a little easier than for others. But the whole point of being in a small market, I'll say, is to be able to get those reps without the stresses that come with, having hundreds of thousands of people watching you, because in a city like Victoria, as great as my experiences here have been, as important as these experiences will be for my career going forward, there's not the same pressure as if you're working in New York or Boston or Philadelphia. Obviously, it's just a lot fewer people watching. So even if something embarrassing were to happen, it's you have to remember, you have to put it into context. You have to remember that this is not going to end your career. There's, in a small market, you're not going to be doomed forever because of one really lousy live shot or one moment where you look really bad. For every moment that you look really bad, just strive for 2 or 3 moments where you look really good, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Because again, you're putting this together, those reels, those on camera, those essentially that visual resume yourself. So you're going to end up choosing what most news directors that you're applying to are seeing. So just trust the process. Be willing to adapt and be willing to have a short memory, because you will have moments. I mean, I've messed up so many times on TV. I've said names wrong. I've forgotten what I was saying mid sentence. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. You just kind of have to learn to brush it off, and just remember that you're here to kind of learn and develop exactly those types of skills. Ignore brush off criticism, especially with social media bullying. I would just say be a force for good. It's hard. There are definitely negative people. Twitter is a great place, but it's also like an incredibly horrible place if you do too much digging. It's kind of a similar thought, but you just have to, it can be challenging, but you have to have a short memory. You have to have confidence in who you are and what you're doing. And, I've found so far there are more good people in this industry than bad. And there are going to be a lot of resources once you're involved in news that you can rely on, that you can get positive feedback, constructive criticism on. I'm not talking about like, oh, you stink, oh, you whatever. You're going to have good, kind people here to help you and to support you and to go through some of those trials together. There are going to be struggles, I'm sure, for everybody at the beginning, because I've had them myself. But you just kind of have to be able to sort of be able to brush some of those off and turn the other cheek.
And what advice would you give to someone about social media or their digital footprint and how that impacts someone with their hiring?
Yeah, so definitely try your best. I mean, I would recommend everyone get on every social media platform out there. It's the one, I should have mentioned that from the start. Actually, that's a great point, Raquel, is one thing everybody can do is to try and develop a social media following. I mean, even if it's not a large one, mine isn't very large, but it's, if you're out there and you're actively tweeting and you're actively on Instagram and Facebook and connecting with community members, people are going to see that and they're going to eventually take notice. And that's something that there's no barriers to entry for. Everyone can get a Twitter, everyone can get an Instagram and a Facebook and be on Reddit and sort of, be active on those social media platforms. Because as we sort of move closer, I mean, we're in the digital age already, but as we become more and more reliant on it, those are the skills and those are the followings that are going to matter way, way more than even traditional on-air sort of camera skill sets. I mean, I'm on air at a traditional TV station, but it wouldn't surprise me if in 50 or 100 years, all news is digital. I mean, who really knows? We're definitely trending in that way. So definitely be active on social media. Be careful not to post anything reckless on your social media. Not to say that I have, but just use your best judgment. Don't just remember, remember that your bosses down the road could be looking at what you're posting. You don't want to tweet anything or post a picture that's somehow going to reflect poorly on yourself. That goes without saying. So just be careful, use your judgment, but definitely be active and, be positive. Just, be positive, be proactive, and, try and get after it.
Thank you so much, Sean, for all that valid information. And once again, we appreciate everyone for connecting with us this afternoon. We appreciate the tour. We appreciate your time. You all stay safe, stay healthy, and we will reconnect in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you listening. All right. Good luck.